Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pesty Podcast. Today, I have Elisabeth on, who is the Sales and Marketing Director at LaJaunie's Pest Control. And LaJaunie's is a client of ours at Pesty. And after we get access to client calls and those recordings, we do lots of stuff with that. One of those is to help our clients, highlight red flags with sales training. And we don't do any actual sales training, but as my team and I had listened to some calls from LaJaunie's, we just noticed how good the calls were, meaning how good the intake team was in terms of the quality of those conversations. And it was a stark difference from some of the other, calls that we listen into with other pest control companies. And when we, tried to find out who's responsible for that and can we learn something here, we found out that person was Elisabeth. So we asked Elisabeth to come on the pod and to share some insights into her sales learnings and strategy. Elisabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but you essentially took over this responsibility towards the beginning of the year because you guys were not happy with the results that you were getting, right? Things were maybe okay. They weren't terrible, but you knew you could do a lot better. And so you were tasked with more or less turning the department around. Is that right?
That is correct. We actually started building in the department a year, actually, to date this month, a year ago. So it's been fully separated as a sales department internally on its own for a year.
Cool. So, and you've turned it around. Like it really, like I said, to speak to the quality of the conversations we've heard, and also, because we're bringing you leads and we have transparency with you guys regarding your ability to turn those leads into paying customers, we know that your KPIs are above average in some ways. So I really wanted to have you on the pod to pick your brain, and let's jump into the first question on the docket, which is, can you start by sharing what the sales department at LaJaunie's looked like when you first?
Yeah. So this is pretty interesting because we had customer service and sales in one. So everyone who was hired as a service representative also sold over the phone. It was pretty chaotic, to say the least. They were doing everything under the sun at one time. So we split it in half. We made just a sales department internally where their only focus is to do sales. Prior, there was no sales script, no sales process or journey, like customer experience journey. They were just taking the calls and handling them and kind of moving on to the next, which doesn't really help your ROI or tracking or anything internally. So that's what it was before. And then we developed our own sales process and department all at the same time.
Interesting. So, and I'll bet that's the case for a lot of companies. It's, I guess, so for a little bit of context, this year you guys will be, let's just say, you'll qualify for the PCT Top 100, right? And so, and also you guys have been around for 16 years, 15 years now?
Yeah, 16.
16 years. So what I find interesting there is that, there's a lot of pest control companies who haven't been around for nearly that long, right? You guys were able to grow a really at a healthy pace and a substantial company over the course of 16 years. And it was only 15 years in when you finally, kind of got this side of the business together, which is kind of impressive in one sense. You got this far without kind of figuring that out. And then on the other hand, I would imagine, I don't know how much you guys look back, and there's not really a purpose to this, but looking back, there's probably a lot of lost opportunities, right? Had you kind of figured this out?
Yeah, when we look back at our data, it's very scattered because we weren't tracking it as we are now. But we're so heavy on customer service and also marketing that it kind of helped weigh how we were doing with the sales side and customer service side, because people were calling all the time for services and we would sell them immediately. But now that the process is completely evolved, it's so much streamlined. We're closing more. Just the dedication to that one department and having people solely sell has just impacted the data in ways that 15 years ago really wasn't a big deal. We weren't kind of worried about it. It was like, okay, we're making money, we're doing the thing. And now it's like, wow, this is kind of going to take us to the next level and move us in ways that we didn't. We were pretty healthy growing the last 15 years, but this whole transition has skyrocketed.
Yeah. Well, especially now when you're having, I think at the peak of 2024, you guys had over 1,000 leads in a month come in, right? And so the differences that you make in that sales process there's higher leverage there, as opposed to if you're only getting, maybe let's call it 100 leads in a month, you're not necessarily going to feel the impact quite as much. And so, which I think is why a lot of pest control organizations kind of put it off until it matters so much that it really can't be ignored.
Yeah, once we have the influx come in to where every so often each individual sales rep is handling almost 200 leads a week, you really have to handle all that with care because that is where your business is going to grow. Those are the most important people to you, is those 200 to 300 per person. Whereas it may seem before you get someone, you sell them, you go do the service, it's great. But if you get 6 people and you only close one, looking at the data, it really is terrible. But
Yeah.
for most businesses, they're like, okay, we got some new people. Let's move on. It's been great. But we look at the data. If 6 people come in, half of them need to stay.
How did you start assessing what needed to be done to improve the sales?
Listening to phone calls. I pretty much have every call, PTSD calls in my brain, and just listen to your calls, even from customer service on down, and then start fixing it from there. Because if you're selling internally over the phone, that's what matters. They're not seeing anyone. This is their first experience, and it needs to be consistent. So we started first with the script. It changed a lot. It changed as I continued to listen to calls, and then it kind of got finalized mid-year. And I used a lot of psychology around it because you do have to make people feel a certain way. That's all they're going to remember, is how you make them feel while also creating value. Very hard to do, especially if you're selling like $2,000 tickets, or, it's not just an easy over the phone process when it's expensive sometimes. So the script was the first thing we had to nail down and get going.
And what were you looking for when you were listening to those calls?
Just the customer experience, how they felt and how they were responding to what the customer service or sales rep was saying, or if they were just talking too much. If you're talking too much over the person on the phone, they're probably not listening. They're not catching on to things. I would also catch certain sales reps not really listening to what the person was saying. So you can help them if you're like overpowering, going straight to the script, but you really didn't acknowledge, confirm, and give them like, hey, I understand your solution, then go into, what we can do for you. Sometimes they just get on the phone and like, yeah, I got something for you, without asking questions or getting into the nitty gritty to make them feel like, hey, they know my problem. They heard me. They're going to give me the right thing. If you just kind of like walk through that whole process without giving it the attention it deserves, you're not going to sell it.
Got it. Okay. And did you start listening to the calls with any kind of training or framework? Like, were you going in any way kind of educated about what a sales call should sound like so that you had something to compare it to? Or were you just going in with an intuition about what a sales call should sound like based on what you think the customer should be feeling and the way that should be communicated?
So I had experience with outside sales, a little bit of inside for standard services in the industry, but overall, LaJaunie's was the first company that I came to that sold the way they sell their services, which is just really easy and convenient for consumers. Most of the time, I just go into it as, we're all consumers, we're all people. So if I was on the phone, how would I want to be handled? And then also listening to competitors. You can call every pest control company within 500 miles of you and get how they handle you on the phone. And my mind is just blown away about how they're treating people or how they're not taking it. Like, it is super important, that initial call. So really calling around and seeing how they internally made me feel as a consumer myself and be like, okay, we're never doing that. We have to flip it completely different and then be consistent with it. Every call deserves the same thing.
Love that. I love that little hack, that little tip right there. Cause yeah, that alone, if you care about customer service, will take you far. And like I said, that was how we were able to spot just the quality of the calls that you guys were fielding, because we could compare it to other calls we were hearing, and what you guys were doing was clearly so much better. After you made your assessment of the calls and what you recognized needed to be fixed in the sales department, what were the first changes you implemented in the sales process?
Honestly, with all salespeople, really sales funnel management, the lack of care that goes into keeping up with all of the leads you get, making sure that you follow up with them, check in with them, and really don't let them go cold was the hardest part, because they get into the process of, if you are heavy with marketing, you're getting brand new leads so fast that you forget about the ones that you talked to 2 days ago. So sales funnel management was super important to just make sure our data is correct. And then from there, I was able to see what else we needed to improve on how they were talking to customers, even how we were delivering some of our service packages, and kind of branding everything, because you don't want to be too long-winded on the phone. If I'm in your house, we can talk all day long. You're comfortable, we're comfortable. You might not have nowhere else to go, but on the phone, you get people driving, leaving work, or they're on their lunch break. So you really have to hammer out how long are they on the phone, their handle time, all the way through the full process, and just staying on script.
Can you walk me through your, maybe not in great detail in terms of how the technology and the follow-ups work, but can you walk me through your sales funnel process? Yeah, can you walk me through that process?
Yeah. So before it was kind of, just touch base with people or they will call back. But now we're more looking for automation. So no matter how long someone reaches out to you, they should still be contacted here and there. But we are heavy on 72 hours. Like, pest control is a needed industry. If they're calling you, they have a problem. And I don't know many people that want to sleep with roaches overnight. If they call you today, if they want to stay with their roaches after 72 hours, they weren't really looking for a solution. But within 72 hours, if they have a problem, they're going to find someone to come out within that time range. So after that, it's kind of too late. If you call after like 3 days, they got someone else, they did it themselves. So many other options appear. So quickly, you have to make sure you call, text, email, any type of platform to reach people and keep in touch with them until they tell you, I don't want services with you anymore. As a consumer, I also appreciate that. I have people who email me and I just ignore it. And then one day I'm like, so glad you emailed me. I know it's been a month, but I'm finally ready. And I never say no, because I don't want them to stop checking in with me until the right time, because things happen, life happens, and it kind of just falls to the side. But your salespeople should be always, every lead is a good lead. I mean, we close things sometimes that's 865 days old. I'm like, never forget about them. Who knows? They could have called no one else, or they may call when it's a big problem again. And then they start thinking about it.
Interesting. So someone calls you. Obviously, you want someone in the office to pick up the phone, but then maybe they say, I need to think about it. What does the next 48 hours or 72 hours look like in terms of your follow-ups with?
So ideally, the rep would do a hard close, even if it's not a sell. It's okay. You need to think about it. That's a great idea. Can I call you tomorrow? Or, I will call you in 3 days. It's really important that you do think about it, talk to your spouse, and lead them into that direction so they know you're going to call them again. We also will send information. So right after the call, we'll send like certain pamphlets, photos, cool little video. So if it's a rat problem, they're going to get the nastiest video we have about rats, like, let me show you this, by the way, while you think about it, think about this, or, are you aware of this? And then we'll just give them not really sales, but more customer service. Like, hey, did you know? Or you might want to look into this, or be aware while you're thinking about it. Let me know if this or that changes. So they feel like, okay, we're really working with them. And it is a big step. Like if you think about signing up for pest control, you're kind of locked in for a contract no matter who you go with. So some people need to think about it. Some people like to think about it, but they mean they're going to call around and price shop and do things like that. So I think that would be the most common objection is they need to think about it and not be
Interesting.
too pushy. You have to give them their space, but don't forget about them, send them information and things to help them really think about it.
Right. It's like you want them to have all the information to make a decision. So it's
Right.
not like you're not pushing the sale. You're just, like you said, you're saying, make sure you think about all these other things too while you're making that decision. And you mentioned automation. What are some of the automations that you have in place for following up with leads?
So we use like most of the software in this industry is not great. We have to make do with what we have. So we do have to we have to export our information and systematically like shoot it through blast, text, email, and things like that, weekly and monthly. But individually, sales reps have to pull their lists, their closed loss, close one, or, if they're whatever stage they are in the funnel, they have to check that every day and filter their CRM. And they have to go through and add a note to their lead until they close it out entirely.
What are some of those technologies that you're using to follow up with customers?
So we're with WorkWave Pest Pack right now as our CRM. That is just internal. So every sales rep has to go in and manually do everything. But outside of that, we will pull the list from that CRM, which is WorkWave, and then we upload it into Cinch, and we have to manually send the list in. We are slowly getting to where the journeys are built for automation. So if someone responds a certain thing, it will queue, a automated text message or something. And this has probably been in the making for a full year, automation. And we're still a long way to get it going because the industry is not big on that, but it's super important.
Interesting. So you have your CRM, which is WorkWave, and then you are using Cinch for curating those lists and then performing your outreach via text
Right.
message. And how do you measure the performance of your sales team, and what metrics are most important to you?
So right now we track weekly per sales rep, and then also monthly. I do quarterly and annually for long term. How
When you
many?
say weekly, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So weekly they'll pull how many leads they had for the week. In total, they have a minimum that they have to hit per week. How many of those they closed from those original leads, and then they get their close ratio from that data, and then their sold value. Those are the only 4 things we track internally. And most of the time they all hit or exceed the minimum for those 4 data points. And then I do that monthly because some people, you could close them this week, they actually back out, or who knows what happens in life. So the monthly would be overall. And then when I pull quarterly, it's really going to let me know what stayed on from monthly, what I had each month versus what per quarter, what those numbers look like internally.
So you have weekly lead volume, like touch point goal, sounds like, essentially, right? The number of leads that and what is that? What is the designation for that person? Is it CSR or sales rep?
So yeah, inside sales rep, even the outside team, they have their how many leads per week they should have. So minimum 5 a day, 25 per week, average. Your A players are going to have more than that. Sometimes the weather affects how many people call. It really depends. So they have to do outbound as well for campaigns and lists and things that they have to work to make sure they're at least getting 25 leads a week as like a base.
When you're looking at that lead to closed one percentage, is that qualified leads to closed one or raw leads to closed one?
That is just raw leads. And, the sales team gives me so much for this because they're like, I didn't even get to talk to this person. I'm like, but we have everything we need. It's a lead. Eventually keep on going and they will call you back or they will answer. And it happens all the time. Right now, they're not answering, but in a couple of days, they might appreciate you texting or calling them. But every so often on our monthly, I'll pull raw versus qualified. And we have a crazy higher number for, if we pitch something, the chances of closing it are much higher than including all of the leads that aren't really qualified. But it's better to include all of them because essentially you're either paying for the lead. It could have been a free lead or a referral. They're just as important. Those are more important because they're free. So you definitely want to make sure you keep those accounted for.
And do you guys have an expectation or a goal for your close rate percentage of raw leads or qualified leads to close one?
Yeah, so the inside team is at 45%
That's raw
weekly.
leads.
Raw leads,
That
45%
is
weekly. They
so
have,
good.
and monthly, they're at 50%. So 45% weekly, 50% monthly. And the outside team is at 50% weekly and 55% monthly for their close ratio. And the pressure's on with them with that. They are very aware that the close ratio must be in green, but we've exceeded even company-wide month over month. The close ratio has been 55, 56%. Highest so far for the year was 61%.
Ridiculous. So good.
And it's, I'm like, the pressure's on because, year over year, like, you got to do better than that. Come on, you got to do better than what we did last month. So it's very interesting to see the growth of it.
And what do you do to incentivize reps to be the best, right? To close and to close well. And what do you do to incentivize them specifically to close the type of business you want to close, right? Because, for example, reps can close one-time deals all day. Getting someone to sign up for an annual agreement is it's a different sale, right? The pitch is going to be a bit different. So, but of course you want that recurring business, right? That's largely, I know how you guys measure success. So yeah, what do you do to incentivize them to work towards the things that align with the business goals?
So ironically, most people think like incentivize was like, okay, you got to get this bonus or you get this if you hit that. I found that doesn't work with very good salespeople. It's not going to motivate them. They're already crushing it. They don't need, a carrot at the end of the stick. So we changed the way we were paying inside and outside last year to make sure we hit our goals. So our reoccurring services, the commission is different. It's much more than a one-time service. We're actually probably considering dropping that one-time lower with the hopes of if you get a one-time service, you can still convert to reoccurring within 30 days. So they still try very hard to get them to convert after that initial one time. But we just had to change the way we were paying on the services to drive that behavior. And that's all it took. We tried like pyramids and bonuses. And if you do this, you do that. It was just exhausting. They were like, okay, great. The best person gets the same thing over and over again. So now we'll just do monthly kind of reward and recognize just generic things and more team building. So they all get together. They'll do like a team building, and whichever team wins, they all get gift cards. They all get extra cash or something like that. And that's been more motivation than if you sell this or if you do this, you get that. Because that is their job. They're supposed to hit these numbers I give them. They're supposed to do these things. They're supposed to perform. We have that standard. And if you can't do it, you just can't work for us. And I say that so much that they jokingly tell new people, you just won't work for us anymore. I'm like, hey guys, like I'd say it just as like a thing, but we'll get them where they need to go.
Interesting. So, of course, there is a commission structure in place, and so there is a financial incentive to close recurring deals, much more so than there is one-time services. But to really move the needle beyond commission structure, it's not about complicating the commission structure and the process with bonuses and different kinds of schemes. It sounds like what has worked for you has been competition and accountability to and by other people on your team.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Most of the time they get caught up in over complicating it. You know, salespeople want to get paid for what they sell, structure that correctly to get the company's goals, and it aligns. They're going to move the direction where they get paid more. That's how they make their money, and then the company gets the benefits from it.
Wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. What training or resources did you find most effective for improving your sales team's performance?
I have not found one sales resource. for the industry for over the phone sales. There's nothing out there. You'll get some sales training for like outside sales or like customer service training where it's really generic. They come off with this big sales tactic approach. Like, you're approaching me like you're trying to sell me. We're the complete opposite. I don't like it. We want to come customer service first and then sell them what they need. And you need it. It's a needed industry. So I haven't found anything that's been beneficial. I do have inspirational people that are on YouTube and sales gurus that just drop gems here and there that you can put into your weekly meetings or whatever you're doing one-on-ones with your salespeople. But I really hope one day, I may have to be the person to do it, to make a sales platform for the industry that is not, some guy showing up, giving me the spill like a door knocker. That's just not what the generations are wanting anymore. It's just a whole different approach to sales.
Cool. So you just had to figure it out on your own, right?
Basically,
Just piece together stuff from here and there. I love it. It's yeah. I mean, I if someone hasn't done what you've done before, and that's the only way, then that's good. I mean, we do a lot of that, right? We're doing a lot of things that no one's ever done, especially when it comes to like, things around AI. There just is no playbook for a lot of these things, and you just got to figure it out, right? Try things, test things, measure it, iterate, improve. Eventually you get to a point where it's actually working pretty well.
And it's really the hard work, Sky and Jared, they have many of friends in the industry that they'll text me and they're like, can you share the scripts with this company? And I'm like, oh, but I do. And I'm like, I get it. It's very hard to sit there and do all of that. And most people don't have the time. Luckily enough, they were able to do the whole sales department and dedicate someone to building it, because there's no resources. There's nothing you can just look up or buy or subscribe to get what you need.
Absolutely. And what role does customer feedback play in shaping your sales strategies, if at all?
So it's kind of tricky because our reps don't get any type of surveys or feedback at all. Even our outside reps, we don't send a review for them. I find it's hard unless you sell them. People can feel different ways about prices, or they could be shopping around, that we just kind of avoid customer feedback overall. Now, I will listen to calls where they're over friendly. Like, the customer got, the whole saying is they forget everything that you offered, sold them, but they will never forget how you feel. I love those calls. Those are my training calls, and they're the most important because they're going to be with us for a lifetime, just because how you made them feel. Not about what we sold them, not about cheapest price, or that we could get out there same day, sometimes like within the hour or so, like after the call. None of that matters. They're just talking as if, they knew each other forever.
And can you share a strategy that didn't work as expected and how you pivoted?
So the last year we tried moving to different CRMs. We were looking for automation and something that tied into marketing, something that could have our data and everything in one, where it's not so manual, where I spend so much time collecting these things or following up and making sure all the sales reps are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that did not work. It did not work. Every time we tried to go to another platform, we even attempted HubSpot. We tried all these things, and it took so much time and effort to go through the process, see if it would fit. How would it fit? How would it work? And it just never worked because they're not industry specific. And all the industry specific people that I spent time with were just, well, give us the ideas, we'll build it out. And that, they don't really have a timeline on it, or it's not really what I'm looking for. They take the idea and try to run with it. And that takes a year or so. So we're stuck with what we have, and we're doing what we can as we still try to find the best CRM for a growing company that can do all the things that we need. But it just doesn't work. Like, if you get started with the software and you have thousands and thousands of people on it, taking them out of that and putting them in something else and hoping it works, it just doesn't. You really need to look for something that can grow with your company and start there.
And if you could do it over again, do you think SPAC is the best option, given your choices?
For me, no. There's other people that work for LaJaunie's that just loves them because they're great people and we go to all their conferences and everything. It's just antiquated. We need high, strong software. We need all of the bells and whistles. And it's one of those things where if it had that, we wouldn't have to hire 2 extra people to keep up with the leads. Our current people would be able to handle it and they would get paid more. But since it's too much to handle, we have to now hire another person and then hire another person, which breaks down the leads, breaks down how much every rep is making. So I personally, I would say they're not the best. I don't know if there is a best out there. I do like things like HubSpot and other softwares, but they're not made for this industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And really what you guys need at the level you're trying to get to, it sounds like it goes back to the automation, right? Your team is spending so much time doing what I call digital paperwork that there is all that inefficiency means they can't handle more leads. And like you said, it also caps what they can make because they can't handle more leads.
And then I just find they slip through the cracks. Like it's not intentional.
Right.
One morning they get 50 and then they forget about Friday. They also had 50 and now the next day they get 25. And I'm like, okay, now we have over 100 people are you making sure every day you go back to them? And they typically do their best, so, the filter and funnel it. But man, if we had automation, like that is out the door and they can just handle every lead that comes in and do more outbound. They would focus on, the referrals and the people we already have and getting them more attention than everything that's incoming and keeping up with them.
On to our last couple questions. What is your approach to handling objections from potential clients?
I just like to rip the Band-Aid off. I do have a little script for objections that every time I hear someone saying it, I'm like, good job, because they feel so uncomfortable. And my favorite one is people like, oh my God, you guys are so expensive. I'm like, well, do you want an iPhone 8 or an iPhone 15? And they just sit there like, you tell me. And they're like, I don't want an iPhone 8. Well, I'm like, well, that's what we are. And then they have that realization like, okay, all right, I get it now. They don't have the perception or, did you price around? What did they give you? Like, tell me, why do you think we're expensive? And most people just kind of are like, I don't know. I just said it because I don't know, it seemed high. And I'm like, it's really not. But getting sales rep to just rip the Band-Aid off, they just like squirm inside. They're like, but they think it's high. And I'm like, who wouldn't, I say that at a cup of coffee, but I'm still going to buy it. Like, it's just one of those things that you just have to confront and then work through it with the customer to where you both have an understanding, and they may need to think about it, but at least you addressed it. And it's not just room for open questioning. Like, okay, why do you think I'm high? Was it another person, or was it another company, or you never called anyone? We're the first company you ever called. And you're like, oh crap, I didn't know pest control was this expensive, or I didn't know it would cost this much. And it's not the company and the pricing. It's just the individual person.
Interesting. Love that. So you're saying you hit it head on, and you are, but you're doing it with like humor, right? Like there's a way to deliver that where the person on the other end of the phone starts laughing.
Yes. Yeah. It's more like just connection.
Or like you're talking to a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, we're not doctors. We're not going to kill anybody. It's easy. It's easy to conversate with someone and make them feel just as human, per se, because there is expensive services. But again, what do you want? What are you looking for? And then we can go from there. And we are sometimes out of people's budgets, but we have ideal clients and an ideal market where not everyone can afford our services. That call's a little bit different, but they still love us after the call. They're like, oh man, now I have to call Jimmy Joe with the ugly truck. And I'm like, sorry, call us back if you would like to pay for our services.
Are there any other specific objections that are most common and that you have ways of handling?
I think the most common that stumps people up is when they will say, well, I need to talk to my husband or my wife, or I'm actually the tenant, not, I don't pay for any of this stuff. Where do you go from there? People are just like, okay, well, let me know, call me back once you talk to them, but they still deserve the hard close of that conversation, because I want to know, what are you going to talk to your wife about? Did you get what I told you entirely? Should I give you an email? should I call her myself? That's my favorite thing. Let me call her and explain everything because I know what I'm talking about. I mean, you called me for a reason is my favorite thing. You called me, let me call her and explain everything since she is going to make the decision. And most of the time they're like, well, I just want to, let her know that it's going to be this price. And they kind of like trail back a little bit, or they appreciate you calling the other person and explaining everything all over again because like they really don't want to do that. They're just like, oh yeah, so and so said it's going to be this price. That's all they're going to say. And you kind of leave the value hanging in the hands of someone who probably called 15 other companies. So just take the initiative when they ever say something. Well, what's the number for your wife or your landlord? Let me call them and I'll explain everything. And then I'll call you back and let you know how it goes. And then that just closes the entire objection down entirely.
Yeah, that's a very convenient way of handling that objection. Because if I'm someone, especially who's like busy, I don't want to play this game of telephone with my partner and like I'm just like, oh, you'll talk to them. Great. That's takes something off of my plate. And then, you let them make the decision about it. Very cool. So um actually, the last question I had was about aligning sales team incentives with the broader goals of LaJaunie's. And I got ahead of myself and asked that question earlier. So are there any other tips, words of wisdom, guidance you can give is there anything I didn't ask that I simply overlooked, but that would be valuable for someone who was in your position a year ago, looking to make drastic improvements to their sales process, their sales funnel, their sales department, that would be actionable, that they can maybe go study or learn or implement?
I'm not sure if there's something they can study. I would probably start with the people you have seated in this sales seat. Are they really sales driven people? You can't find them in a customer service role. You can't find them doing technician work. A lot of the times companies try to move people around and put them into doing sales, and it just doesn't work. You need to have someone who is okay with sales. The pay process, they have to be driven, they have to be hungry. They're typically emotional people, but you really have to just have a salesperson in that role, and then they naturally do what they like to do, and it makes life easier for yourself. You can't coach a service rep to be a salesperson. It's not going to happen. You can't coach collections to sell anything. It's not going to happen.
That's sage advice, and I'm sure is going to save people a lot of headaches if they take it to heart.
Yeah, just leave them where they're at. They're good at what they do. Do not move them anywhere else. Just start with someone who's good at sales, or, in the interview, try to sell me. Just convince me of one thing. If you can do that, I feel like you could probably sell something. If you can't convince me of one thing just in a normal conversation, I don't want you selling any of my services.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Elisabeth. This has been incredibly insightful. I learned a lot, which I think means the audience is also going to learn a lot. And I appreciate your transparency and willing to come on and share your wisdom with, this audience of other pest control operators. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great.